Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe on behalf of the Minneapolis Club, Upsize Minnesota, and my group, Club Entrepreneur. Welcome to our workshop, Grow or Go. I liken this decision, I've used this analogy before, as to if you're selling a house and you're in Minnesota, you do it in the spring, the weather turns, and you have to decide, all right, do I paint this room or that room, or do I do the kitchen or not, or this or that, so you're making kind of an ROI decision. And to me, when it comes time to thinking about is it the right time to sell your business, you're making an ROI decision as to is the time right now, what should I do with the business, and so forth. And so that's what led to the concept behind this panel. And as such, Upsize, and again, my group Club Entrepreneur, has put together a very talented group of experts who can serve as your trusted advisors. Upsize Minnesota is a how-to magazine devoted to helping business owners build bigger and more profitable companies. Andy Telejohn is over here to my right. Andy is the managing editor at Upsize. And then Club Entrepreneur and my firm, Brimacombe & Associates, support folks like you in helping you refine strategies, assemble resources, and secure funding. And I do that by advising, going on boards, and making investments. In our joint effort to provide actionable content, Upsize Minnesota and Club Entrepreneur offer you today's panel. And with that, I want to introduce you to our event sponsors. Highland Bank is a $500 million family-owned community bank. Sunbelt Business Advisors is a mergers and acquisition and business brokerage firm. And Tech Guru is an outsourced provider of managed IT services. They manage IT networks for a number of different industries. However, they do specialize in accounting firms. So thank you very much to our sponsors. And with that, let me introduce the panelists. To my immediate left is Chris Jones, an M&A advisor at Sunbelt Business Advisors. Melissa Johnston, Senior Vice President at Highland Bank, and Micah Thor, President at Tech Guru. So now that you've been introduced to everybody, let's hear a little bit more about them as to their bios and how they fit with the panel. And why don't we start with you, Chris? Give us a minute or two on your bio.
Great. Thanks, Rick. Good to see everybody. It's my first time on a Clubby panel, so I'm excited to be here. Usually you get the much more talented and intelligent Peggy Demuse, so I think somewhere in the room. You're going to have to settle for me today, but I'm the managing partner for Sunbelt Business Advisors. We have a team of about 35 folks here in Minneapolis. We're the world's largest seller of private companies, and we help business owners get ready for their exit and net the most when they exit, assuming that's what's most important to them. My bio, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to some crazy serial entrepreneurs when I was still in college, which really changed my life. I was planning on going down a corporate route while I was in school, and I was exposed to really entrepreneurial mentors who showed me what building a business and growing it and selling it could look like. And I was there while they built it, I was there when they sold it, and I ended up working for a Fortune 200 private company, helping them buy companies. So that's how I got into this, not by really a plan, getting into doing M&A, was that background. But I joined Sunbelt about 18 years ago, and started helping small and mid-sized business owners do that same thing. And it's a ton of fun. So thanks for having me.
How many people do you have in the firm here in Minneapolis?
Team about 35, including our M&A advisors, business brokers, analysts, and support staff, and then about 70 in the Midwest. And Sunbelt has close to 200 offices worldwide, so we're the world's largest seller of companies. So.
And then also on the buy-side stuff, which I think you'll get into later,
yeah.
You can do national searches because you have the offices around the country.
We do. Yeah, we do a lot of sell-side, but we offer buy-side to select clients if they have a good plan on what they want to do.
Okay, great. Melissa, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yes, so I've been in business banking my entire 16-year career. I started with a different bank, and I was at the bank holding company level when that bank was in acquisition mode. So they made 2 acquisitions while I was there, and we looked at 5 different banks. And now I've been at Highland Bank for 7 years, and our owner, CEO, Rick Wall, is here today in the front. And then Ryan, one of our bankers, is over in the back if you want to wave, Ryan. So, yes, I enjoy being on the front line now, working with clients every day through their opportunities and challenges and just helping them navigate whatever will come their way.
Great. Thank you very much. Micah.
Thanks, Rick. Excuse me. Micah from Tech Guru. Tech Guru is an outsourced IT support company. We work as basically the entire IT department for a small business that doesn't have their own. That IT department has a CIO, it has an engineer, it has a tier 1, 2, and 3 tech. Obviously, you're not going to hire that level of staffing for your business if you're under, 1,000 people. However, businesses of just 5 people need that level of sophistication with their technology. So it's a great fit to outsource something like that to be able to have access to that whole stack. We call ourselves the Caring Technology Company, and one thing I've never talked about on this panel is some of the cool stuff that we do to attract and retain our talent. So I'll just do that real quick to explain the Caring Technology piece. So we dub ourselves the Caring Technology Company because we truly care about the work that we're doing for our clients, but we also really care about the staff we have at Tech Guru. So we brainstormed how can we really stand out and show these people that we truly do care about them. So we started bringing in food for breakfast, lunch, and snacks. We started paying for company car allowances, buying them new cell phones every 2 years, new laptops every 2 years, standing desks, gigantic 43-inch monitors, which to everybody in this room who's not in IT is probably an annoyance, but to these guys it's like a dream come true. So we're constantly looking for ways that we can show these people that we care. But the most recent one is a mandatory mental health day, which I don't know if is an industry first, but it's been amazing. We force someone to take a Friday off once a month. They're not allowed to work. It doesn't count against PTO or anything like that. They're just scheduled to not be in the office so they can recharge. So that's a little bit about us.
Oh, that's great. Do you have any openings?
Yeah. Yes,
I like that.
always.
All right. Chris, come back down here. Tell us a little bit about kind of how you fit into this topic today, a little story, anecdote, put a little color around our topic.
Sure. So maybe a story, a typical way that I'm involved at the firm in helping our clients is Peggy as a broker or one of our other brokers would bring me in up front meeting a client to help understand their goals, what they're looking to do, whether they're looking to grow through acquisition or more often they're looking to sell. We help assess value. And sometimes we have to have tough conversations. So sometimes I'm the bad cop. I'm a really nice guy, but sometimes Peggy makes me say things to folks like they're not ready. No, she doesn't really, but sometimes you have to have tough conversations with clients and say, your business is probably going to sell for around this price, but you're telling us you need this, and we have to help them understand how to get there, or understand why somebody else telling them it's worth this might not have their best interests in mind, which we sometimes see too. So we're trying to be truth tellers and really give good advice to people on what they can do to exit. Because if you're a business owner, it's probably 80% of your net worth is tied up in your business, and you really need to get good advice with that asset you've grown. So I'd say that's probably my biggest role, is big picture advice with clients and our brokers.
And that must not be necessarily an easy conversation to have.
Well, so these two allowed me to talk about my kids some at the table. Okay, so I want you guys to imagine a lot of business owners that are in the room, your businesses can be like your kids. Imagine if you were talking about your kids and somebody said, yeah, but tell me about their flaws, right? And started listing off all the things that maybe your child could improve on. That's sometimes what it's like to talk to a business owner about, and they don't always like it. They do like the folks that will tell them, oh, sure, I can get you $10 million for your business, but that's not really good advice sometimes. Sometimes they're not ready to get the price they want or need.
Great, thank you. Melissa.
Yeah, so I'm on the financing side, and I work with sellers on understanding the impact of how a deal will influence them going forward. So typically on the sales that I work on, there's some aspect of seller financing, earnout, holdback. So it's really just truly looking at that structure and talking through kind of how I'm seeing deals getting done and helping them navigate how that will impact them. And then on the flip side, with the buyers, I work with the buyers on what could be a layered capital structure or other ways on how they can put a deal together to buy a business, whether it's a financial buyer, a strategic buyer that may be merging with another company, a family office, a trust. All those deals get done differently, and the structures can often be pretty complex. And with all the deals getting done, the industry, the banking industry, we like to say is quite frothy at the moment. So it's really been interesting to me to just see all the deals out there and how they're getting done, and talk with sellers and buyers on those aspects. And then sometimes the buyers that I talk to, they may be looking to buy a division of a larger company or a location for a company that may have multiple operating properties. And that's where it gets really interesting, because the buyers are really trying to understand the credibility of those extrapolated numbers. And so to have a banker, an accountant involved to really delve into, what are the numbers, what are you truly buying? That's where I find I'm adding a lot of value to buyers, to just make sure that what they are getting is actually what they think they're getting. So that's how we sort of fit into the discussion as bankers.
Also not easy that they're getting what they think they're getting.
No. And it's never exactly what you think, but to try to get it as close as we can. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Micah.
So on our side, I guess three things. One, we have acquired another IT company in the past, and we have been approached multiple times for acquisitions and even pursued some of those offers to a certain point, never to a closing table kind of thing, but at least evaluated whether or not it was the right time to sell. Secondly, we come in a lot of times for our clients on the due diligence side, if they're doing an acquisition. And every once in a while, we'll get one of these due diligence forms, and they're not doing an acquisition, and we're like, are you being acquired? So it's always kind of funny to see that. But there's a lot of questions that relate to technology in these due diligence forms that they maybe weren't aware of ahead of time. And then the third part is we strategically advise our clients on a proactive side if they're getting ready to sell in the near future, or they're looking at buying another company, what are the technical due diligence items that sometimes get overlooked and should definitely be paid attention to.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, one last time coming down this way and working our way to my left down the panel table. So Chris, let's start with you, given your role at Sunbelt. Give us a couple of minutes, kind of your overall assessment of the grow or go decision, and how you view that and what kinds of things you'd like to share with the audience.
Sure. For business owners, or for those of you who know business owners that want advice, I think one of the best questions you can ask is, are you still excited when you get up in the morning to run your business? Do you still have a clear vision of where you want to take it? Are you excited about taking it there? And do you have the capabilities to get it there? Growth from 0 to $1 million is generally much more easy to achieve and has less risk in it than growing from $1 million to 2 or 2 to 5 or certainly 5 to 50. I mean, as you get higher up the mountain, there's more risk to it. And maybe it still excites you, maybe it doesn't. So that'd be one nugget I'd give you. The other is, it's often seen as a negative to talk about the go decision. And don't let that happen. What you said earlier, Mike, is really important. When you guys are approached, you consider it. Because you should take it as a compliment. When somebody approaches you about wanting to buy your company, it doesn't mean you're ready, but it can teach you a ton. And the other thing I'm seeing a lot of these days is, and we're introducing it more and more, is it doesn't have to be, I'm gonna stay or I'm gonna go. Sometimes there can be a variation in between, where you say, we helped do a deal with, where we represent the buyer actually, a local company, Speed Manufacturing. They were looking to grow, and we helped them with an acquisition of a California company with substantial EBITDA, I mean, 10 million plus EBITDA, high growth company, young owners. How many people here would sell if you were young owners of a company cranking out 10 million in profit and the future looked bright? I don't think I would. So why did they? They had built a company before, and they realized they were hitting the level of where they could take it, but they kept a significant equity interest in that business. And what Smead brought to the table was national presence, national distribution, and 19 national salespeople, and a commercial line to sell more of these products. So if you see somebody who approaches you and you're thinking, oh gosh, I'm not ready to sell, I still love it, think about, can you take it to the next level if you want to? Or do you need some capabilities maybe a buyer has? Because they're not just paying you with money. Sometimes they're paying you with remaining interest or capabilities that they bring. So that's what I'd share.
Great, thank you. Melissa, tell us a little bit from your perspective on the banking side about the topic.
Sure. Yeah, so I guess how we fit into this topic would be, I'd like to share just an example. So in 2011, a specialty construction client of mine came into the bank and said he was really wanting to grow the company, and so we looked through his last 3 years' financial statements and accounts receivable and worked on some projections of cash flow and came to the conclusion that he really needed a line of credit to help him to grow and to continue to grow. So over the next few years, we frequently looked at kind of his numbers and kept increasing the line and kept helping him continue to grow. And then in 2014, he was really spending a tremendous amount of time in his business instead of on his business, and so started delving into the aspects of EOS, traction. I promised Greg I'd talk about traction. How many of you traction? Okay. So that was extremely helpful to him and being able to kind of step away from the business and get the right people in the right spots within his company. And so he didn't have to be there every day and started looking at other things that were more interesting. He got into some investment real estate and other projects. And then in about 2016, he made the determination that his heart just wasn't in the business anymore. And you can say that in different ways. He ran out of gas in the tank. I mean, Chris alluded to it too. I mean, sometimes owners just get to a point where they just don't have the heart anymore. And that's where he was. So we sat down and talked through it, talked about it, and I mean, he had a steep growth trajectory and could have really benefited by staying in the business and potentially sold the business for a lot more, but he just didn't want to stay in it anymore, and with the valuation market the way it was and the appetite for PE, he just decided that was the right time. So teamed up with an investment banker and got multiple offers on the business, and then sold the business late last fall with a 7x multiple. And so just having those conversations early on with the bank and just having a banking partner and a good banking partner, someone that understands your business, can help anticipate your needs, especially when you're in a growth mode, is just really how banks can fit into the picture and the lens that I look through.
Thank you very much. Micah.
Sure. A couple thoughts. In our own experience, the first offer that ever came, for the company was several years ago. It was the first time this ever happened. Was truly, number one, a huge compliment and ego boost. And then, there's this big number, and we've got these visions in our head of this successful exit way, way earlier than we ever thought was going to happen. And then I think a lot of people in this room probably know the end of this story, that it falls apart before it ever really even gets started. So we've learned about this throughout the process. And the last time that it happened was a few years back, and we were looking at it from that strategic partnership perspective. And we were, we're not making $10 million in profit, unfortunately, but we were making good profit for the first time in a while, because as a growing company, not knowing how to manage finances and cash and that sort of thing, we weren't always having consistent profit until right about this time that we got this new offer. So we looked great, finally, and it was like, well, we finally got to this point now, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. It looks like it's just going to keep going, right? So if we just fast forward, 5 years from now, at the same profit and same growth trajectory, that's a huge multiple. And so that's what ended up happening. We finally were like, all right, well, what would you guys be willing to sell it for? We had to give them this astronomical number, and it wasn't an insult. We were just like, we're in our mid-30s. We can't just, walk away and retire. We have to get a pretty sizable number, and the only way that you'd be able to give us that is if there was some sort of strategic direction that we're going to be able to take this thing to justify it. And in that scenario, there just wasn't, so it was no hard feelings. But it was a great lesson for us in that we realized if we're looking for a strategic partner, we should be looking for that, right? If that's our play for growth, then we need to be hyper-focused on that, and we will find somebody. That's a possibility, especially if we're willing to give up some equity in the company. But I think what we concluded is that we want to keep trying to grow on our own at this stage. As we're at about 3 million, we think we can take it to 10, and then maybe reevaluate at 10. And then when we're at 10, if we decide, all right, something's shifted in our industry, and we're pretty sure that we want to sell, we're going to set a 3-year runway to that sale point and really get the investments in the company that are going to give the most return. I loved your example of putting your house on the market. Probably not going to put the pool in because it doesn't have the ROI that the kitchen remodel does. And I think when I read that, I thought about all the pool type stuff that we've been doing lately, and I'm like, man, that's a great indicator that we still love doing this, and we're investing in the team, and we're spending money on stuff that doesn't necessarily have a hard resale ROI. So that was a really helpful thing for me to think about.
So
You're going to call us when you're ready? You guys heard it.
Doing deals at the table.
So do I get a finder's fee on that?
Sure.
So, yeah, Dave. Okay, hold on, let me repeat that question so make sure everybody heard it and for the video too. So the question was, a bunch of small businesses, the owners run out of steam or don't have the capabilities to get it to the next level or whatever. So what does Sunbelt do to help those folks?
So although we provide some advice when we see that, and that's one of the things we see, that we had a handout earlier too, it talks about like other issues we see with business owners that can help value. But that one's tough because it's personal, right? And I find it's really hard to reignite. What I've seen is it's hard to reignite. Peggy, I don't know what you've seen. I mean, usually what's going to happen is they're not excited anymore, and the business goes like this, under their steam with their gas, getting there, and they're the hard charger, and then they aren't excited anymore, or they don't have the capital, or they're not excited with their partners, or maybe there aren't partners, and it just starts slowly falling off. I don't have that answer. I think it's really tough for a business owner. I don't know, Peggy, maybe you have a better answer for that one.
Sure, go ahead, Peggy. So if you didn't hear that over on that side of the room, Peggy said, hey, if you're not excited as a business owner to get up in the morning to go have at it, then it's time to find something else to do.
Yeah, I wish we were better at that. But maybe one other idea too is surround yourself with business coaches or groups like this who are willing to talk pretty openly about those topics and say maybe they're in the wrong role. Maybe they're just doing the wrong thing. Maybe they need a partner who could reignite them and they keep some of that interest. But that's a tough one.
Yeah, Alex.
Lots of questions, but the one that comes top of mind following that, which is the role of formal boards of directors, particularly in small, closely held firms where oftentimes it's mom and dad, probably uncle, or informal advisors, and how do you bring them into this process?
Okay.
They could theoretically have huge influence on outcomes.
Sure. So again, so you hear it over here, and for the sake of the video, the question was, well, what about boards, formal boards, as well as boards of advisors? What's their role in the process?
Who, you want me to take that one?
Anybody
Or
who wants
you
to
guys have
chime, all three of you can chime in on it.
Okay. Do you guys have strong opinions on boards?
I personally don't have a lot of experience with boards, to be honest. So.
Although I would say you're an EOS shop through Dan. So in a way, Dan has kind of an informal group of people that he's interacting with on the EOS front, and technically I'm not one of those people, but with that said, Dan and I get together to talk about things. So I know Dan has a universe of trusted advisor, friend types.
So EO and Vistage have been our, I guess, board of advisors environments before. So we, those are, for those of you who don't know, those are professionally facilitated peer groups where you can sit down with other business owners and discuss, what's going on. I think, I was thinking about that as you were talking about how do you know it's time to go. Your peer group might tell you, because you've got this level of candor and openness with them, and they get to know you personally, that they might say, yeah, it's time.
I'll just add to that. So our business is, we kind of break it into two different sizes of companies. So under 5 million in revenue, which is about 90% of the businesses in this market, in the U.S. are under 5 million in revenue and don't get past that line. We call that Main Street. And then 5 to 100 million revenue, we refer to as mergers and acquisitions. Under 5 million, definitely that. Peer groups, more informal advisory settings, but peer groups or EOS or accountability groups that you're plugged into. But I think once you get past 5 million, you need to be more formal. That's what I've seen work. You need a board or some group of advisors who has done that for companies that have gone from 5 to 50 or have gone from 50 to 100, who have that experience. If you don't have that, then how can they possibly advise you or tell you, maybe it's time for you to, move aside as the founder and bring in some middle or executive management to help.
Okay, keep going. Okay, so why don't, the question was, Andrew's a solopreneur, has got a business that's up and running, making progress. Question was taking it to the next level. How about, can I talk offline with you on that one? Because that might be a better conversation for a different venue. But anyway, all right, so I had a couple more questions that I was going to ask them. And then I had a checklist of 10 things that we were going to go through, and the concept was with those 10, if you could check affirmative on a healthy chunk of those 10, that maybe says, hey, if now is the time for you personally, that you might be open to selling your business. Likewise, if you were on the negative side of all 10 of those, then that kind of is giving you an answer. So I had a couple more things I wanted to get to, and then we'll dive into more questions. With that said, I very much appreciate the contributions here. And again, for those of you who haven't been, we can keep the room as long as we want throughout the afternoon. So afterwards, feel free to come up and talk to the panelists, and I'm sure they'd be happy to get to you. So Mike, I'm going to go down to you. You talked a little bit about making specific investments, and that was the question I was going to ask you, which is, of these kind of critical technology investments, and some of them hopefully would go in the bucket of whether you stay or go, they're worth making. Are they more ROI driven, or are they more kind of as an enabler to make the business grow or to facilitate more mission critical kind of functionality?
Yeah, great. So the thing about software implementation and technology, it's not necessarily an overnight thing, right? So if you've got a sale, if you're in due diligence, it might be too late to try and ramp up some value by putting a piece of technology in place. Because if you're going to do like an ERP for a manufacturer, that's at least 12 months, maybe more like 18 to 24 rollout to select the software, implement it, train, and fully adopt all the different pieces of it. And then it all changes again, and you have to start over. So there's absolutely value in having an ERP in place, but that's something that's going to, if you've got a 3-year runway to your sale point, great time to look at that, right? If you've got if you're in Excel hell, as some people call it, or you're using an Access database or something like that. I mean, if one of our clients is looking at acquiring your business and they have us go in there to do an assessment of the technology, we will go to town on that stuff and say, this is a $1 million ERP needs to be installed in this manufacturing environment ASAP. So take that right off the top line for the sale price, right? That's like you need a whole new roof on the house kind of thing. So be aware of that. If your technology is outdated, that's something that's going to get picked apart. Some of the low-hanging fruit might be hardware age, right? If you've got a bunch of computers that are 5 years old, that's another thing that we would look at and say, all right, you've got a significant investment in infrastructure based on the age of these computers. And that might show up, in due diligence on the balance sheet as well, but sometimes something that's overlooked. Other low-hanging fruit, if there's an easy cloud migration to get rid of a bunch of servers, that could be something on the buying side. You could say, oh, well, you're not actually going to need to replace this stack of equipment because we can migrate you to a cloud solution. So even though that's considered an asset right now in the purchase of the sale, you might be able to challenge that and say, actually, that's not worth anything to us because we're going to migrate that to the cloud.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Let's see, Melissa, let's do you next. Tell us a little bit about how working with the banker is similar to working with the buyer, and how your due diligence process is either similar or different from a potential buyer.
Sure. Yeah, so our due diligence process is definitely very similar to a buyer's due diligence process. And what I will say is the banks aren't doing any due diligence or asking any questions that the buyer shouldn't be asking. So if the bank's asking a question or wanting to review a contract, the buyer should be also doing that same thing. What I will say on the bank's due diligence items is we may be doing things in a little different order than the buyer would be, and we might have a little different intensity on some items than the buyer would be. And one of, I guess, the main things that we look at in terms of the buyer, whether that's a financial buyer or a strategic buyer, is just that buyer's ability to run the business, which is difficult, clearly, to ascertain when you're talking with someone, because a financial buyer may think that they're going to be successful at owning this company because they've been managing to a budget within a company for the last 3 to 10 years, and so that they now have the skills to run this business. And so we spend a lot of time talking with potential buyers and just really understanding what their background is, what their resume is, and how those skills can transfer into the business they're buying. And if they don't have specific managerial skills, we're going to want to know a lot about that management team, how long they've been there, if they're tenured, and if there's non-compete, if there's employment contracts, and just really understand those aspects. And then again, in terms of kind of the intensity around the bank's due diligence, we also spend a lot of time on contracts, whether those are contracts for future revenue or leases. Property leases are something that we spend a lot of time on at the bank, and it's from the buyers and sort of the business owner's perspective, they're always extremely optimistic about their ability to find real estate to operate their business in. And the banks really need affirmation of that. We want the lease term to match up to our loan term, or at least be as long as our loan term. And so sometimes that can be an issue on the due diligence side. If someone's buying a company and that particular lease is maturing next year, the buyer would tell us, oh, I'll find space, or I'll renegotiate that lease, or I'll figure that out. And so we always want to talk about, the cash flow, the financial impact of, a new property situation. And then I guess I'll mention just also on the due diligence side, when it comes to lien searches, it seems like, we'll sometimes hone in on a lien search on a company that's being acquired, and what shows up on there and how to get that cleared up. And it seems like sometimes the buyers kind of either wait for that or it's not as important to them, and we want to know, who has liens on the business and what's it going to take to get that lien removed. So that's just kind of some of how the bank's due diligence is similar and different to the buyers.
Great, thank you very much. Chris, we talked a little bit about how Sunbelt can help business owners that are in the growth stage. We all know that as you've mentioned, and folks here know that you're on the sell side, but talk a little bit more, go in a little more detail about how Sunbelt can help on the growth side of it.
Sure. So I'd say there's 2 major categories. One would be looking at how your company scores on value drivers, which generally are going to drive organic growth. And if you didn't get one of these, and you want to get your value builder score, Hannah may have extra copies in the back. Hannah, if you could just give a wave to everybody in case anybody needs to find.
Over here in the back.
right, so if
Hi
you
there,
didn't-
Hannah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned to Rick that I wanted to put this in front of the Club E group because it kind of captures a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, and you can get a free score on how your business ranks today from a value standpoint, and it overlaps a lot of things you said, a lot of things that are on your list. You know, should I add the roof or the pool? It will give you an assessment. It's kind of like going in to see the doctor of where you're at today. You know, your weight, your height, your blood pressure, all that stuff. It's kind of that for your business. I think you need a foundation like that first before you talk about growth to say, where am I at? And then what you might see here is that there's some weaknesses, like let's take customer concentration, or actually let's take Switzerland structure. How dependent is your business on any one employee, customer, or supplier? Well, if you have a key, #1 producer in your company, and it would be a disaster if they left, one, that company is not very sellable, especially if that's tied up with one customer or one employee or both. It's certainly going to hurt your value, but even if you were never going to sell, that might be the problem you want to work on from a growth standpoint. So basically, we can give you some free knowledge of things to pursue. We are not implementers of that, but there's plenty of people in town we could refer you to that Peggy knows and I know and our team knows. I'm sure you guys know, and certainly Rick knows, that could help you once you identify your issues. So there's organic growth. The other is simpler. We can help you make a strategic acquisition. But I will tell you, most companies we talk to who say they want to grow through acquisition are nowhere near ready. They think they're ready. They think they have a plan. They do not have a plan. They do not have they say, we want to grow through acquisition. Okay, well, what do you need in your company, right? What are you trying to buy? Are you just trying to buy earnings? Because that is not a plan. What capabilities are you trying to buy? Do you need management? Do you need a new product? Are you trying to buy technology and the future and diversify the future of the company? They almost never have that answer. So most of those we turn down because we're going to bring them a bunch of acquisition opportunities, and they're never going to pull the trigger because they don't know what good looks like, right? So if you're going to grow through acquisition, sit down, and I do the same thing. Evaluate your business, figure out what you need. If you're just buying earnings, you can buy tons of companies and tons of industries for financial reasons. But if you're going to grow strategically, right, you really need to have a real plan for that. The fancy word for it is investment thesis, but all that is just banker talk for a plan, right? It's just a lot of syllables for the same thing.
So just without going into the details of the buy-side process, just kind of 1 minute, 30 seconds, how long does it take, and what are the key points that you all would help somebody with that kind of process?
For
a buy-side engagement.
On buy-side? It depends on the size. It depends really on the industry we're going after, but typically we're engaged for 6 to 12 months in most searches. Peggy's working on a project right now in technology, and I think it's a 6-month engagement. But it's for smaller companies under $5 million in revenue. If you were looking for something larger, 5 to 100 million, there are less targets. I mean, very few companies get up to that size. So those we might need a year, sometimes longer. If you're going to grow through acquisition, look at what the biggest companies in the world do. Look at Google. Look at the acquisitions they've made. Growth through acquisition is a proven strategy. Once you get that flow going, it can become a great way to grow your company. But it needs to be a discipline like anything else.
Thank you. Okay, so I mentioned that I had come up with 10 things that you all could kind of take with you, check through the list. Some of them would be on the Sunbelt company value drivers list here. So there's some duplication, but certainly worth going through. So panelists, just give me kind of your thoughts as we tick through these 10 things. And again, the idea would be if a company has all 10, then gee, options are probably pretty wide open for you. If you have none of these 10, then you probably don't have a lot of options. The first one being the HR house is in order. What comes to mind when I say that to you all?
I guess I'll just make a comment, and I'm smiling because it's kind of a funny story, but so one of my clients bought an assisted living business last year, and it was like his fourth one, and he got the interim financials right before we were going to close, and just kind of comparing, you know, the interim numbers compared to interim last year, and looking through, making sure everything tied out, and the payroll was all out of whack. And here the prior owner had given everybody raises like 60 days before the closing. And so, so HR House and Order can cover a lot of different things, but I think, you know, from a seller's perspective, to just understand kind of the compensation package, again, non-compete agreements, employment contracts, and if you're doing something like giving everyone raises, to be able to really explain that, define that, and talk through that, because obviously my client was, I mean, the closing got delayed because it's like, okay, now we need to forecast out our financials and understand how this works. So just, yeah.
So
HR.
you're on board.
So I'm on board with the HR in order.
Right. Micah, Chris?
You know, just hearing you talk about that, I think our HR would be something really interesting. I mean, there's nothing wrong with our HR, let me preface it this way, but we do unlimited PTO, we have this mandatory mental health day, we do all kinds of stuff that's atypical that someone might not be looking for. And I'm not sure what the answer is to be able to uncover that, but I guess digging in deeper to what is the total compensation package for each employee, and maybe what is that hidden paycheck too? Because it might be, you might be thinking, all right, we can scale this company by X, and we're going to add this many people along the way, and this is what the salary cost is for those persons. But in our company, that doesn't include the groceries, right? That doesn't include the car allowance, the cell phone plan, the home internet. I mean, there's like a dozen things that don't show up on somebody's paycheck. And we do that because we can do it through the company, and it's way better from a tax optimization standpoint. But would definitely get missed when you're doing that calculation in your head of how many people per dollar of revenue it takes to run this company.
Great. Anything to add?
I can't beat her story.
Okay.
No.
All right, we'll
Yeah.
we'll cut it off there. Okay. And by the way, not to say that this is a perfect list or an all-inclusive list, but I also tried to rank it going in order of importance as we worked through the list. So that was the first one. Number 2, outwardly facing things are up to date and properly positioned, meaning website, et cetera.
Ooh, I'll take that one.
Okay.
So go have somebody look at your website and guess at how much revenue you produce. And I'll bet they guess less. Unless you have a wonderful website. Most of the websites we look at, you know, we'll be talking to a company generating $5 million in revenue, and the site's straight from the 90s. You know, they just, because they're busy running their companies. So does your website, it's a first place a buyer is going to go. It's the first place. You may never get a chance to talk to them because they visit your website or your social media pages, or they can't find your social media pages, or they find the bad reviews that you got that you're not aware of, and they never talk to you again. So I'd look at your website honestly and say, does it reflect what your company is?
I'm on board.
We've found, just to further that, we've found that most of our sales are done before we even talk to them, because they've scoured our website. If they're a high fact-finding, detail-oriented person, they will have looked at every single page on that website, and now they want to just talk to a human being to make sure that we're not sociopaths, and they want to know how much it's going to cost. But cost really is not usually a factor at that point. It's more about trust than anything else. And if they've picked up the phone and called us, that means they're already there, because that's how people are buying these days.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to add 2 things. Sam Stender, raise your hand back there. So on the social side, Sam can talk to you about that. She's done a number of different things with Club E, and I appreciate your help. And then nobody added this one to the list, but I want to make sure it gets covered. I wrote it down here as be the face of the industry. So is there an award that you can give out or recognize people for? Is there some kind of ranking that you can create, or an event that you can create, or a benchmarking process or something? So try to think of ways that your company can be the face, not only of your own business, but tie it in with the face of the industry. So I wanted to add that to the list. Okay, number 3, a unique and differentiable position.
Well, Well, I'll say that now more than ever, sophisticated buyers are looking for that recurring revenue model, subscription-based revenue. They're afraid of sort of the project-based P&L, so just all income statements aren't created equal. So as a business owner, if you're trying to sell, to just think about what's your revenue comprised of, and if it is recurring and it is locked in, it's more valuable than just a project-based revenue model.
Absolutely. And you were asking about differentiating value too, right? Like what things, so I definitely agree with that one. I mean, that's something that if you want to see a broker or an M&A advisor get excited, as we get excited about weird stuff, recurring revenue, right? Contractual revenue, but also be able to articulate, whether if you're looking to sell, be able to articulate what your differentiating value is. How many folks have been exposed to that concept in the room, just to kind of feel of DB? So a few of you. If you haven't, get exposed to it. There's some great, Rick certainly could point you towards some resources, but also when you're looking to acquire, you need to ask what their DB is. Because if you don't have a differentiating value or something that makes you different, then you're a commodity. And either you just acquired a commodity company and maybe you paid too much, or you are a commodity company competing on price. And that's okay if that's how you compete, but then just know that. But if you have a DB, whether it be your technology or the way you motivate your employees or your people or your approach or how you monetize, man, shout that from the mountaintops, you know, because that will drive your value way up in your business.
Great, thank you. Fourth one, business model, which ties a little bit into that recurring revenue, renewable subscription model, which I totally agree, whether it's the investment community or buyers, those revenues are valued significantly higher than others. But there are a couple of other things like, okay, the business model, maybe you're selling the blades to go with the razors, or maybe you get paid up front. I know the stickiness factor fits into Micah's business. In fact, maybe Micah talk about that, because I assume your lifetime value of a client is quite long because they pick you, you provide good service, they're not apt to leave. So maybe touch on that and then we'll get other comments.
Yep. So back to that trust thing on our website, we pay a really close attention to setting minds at ease that we have the capabilities to do what they're asking us to do, because we're looking for a client long term as well. So we want to make sure that it's a really, really good fit and they feel comfortable. And we also switched to month-to-month contracts, which was kind of counterintuitive from a value building perspective, because that if somebody's looking to buy our company, they could make the argument that, hey, everybody could leave tomorrow, right? Well, what's been interesting we've found is that our industry has actually started shifting to this because it was such a barrier to entry for closing deals. People didn't want to sign a 3-year contract of something that might be a nightmare. So what we can show, though, is retrospectively, we've had these clients on month-to-month contracts for 5+ years. This industry doesn't care about contracts. The stickiness is so strong. I mean, even if you're unhappy, it's still more painful to change than it is to stay. Not that we have any unhappy clients ever, but just, that's one of the stickiness factors that can make a company really, really valuable. If you're not able to do the long-term contracts, making sure that you found a way to be so important to that client that it's a really unsavory thing for them to switch.
Anybody else comments on the business model? Sure, Alex.
Change from month to month. How did that change your culture, knowing that the customer could potentially terminate tomorrow?
Okay, so if you didn't hear that over there, the change month contracts, how did it change the corporate culture, given that the employees had to think about things a little bit differently as it related to the customers?
I don't think it changed the culture at all, because the reason that we did it was to close more deals and to have a philosophical belief with our clients that we're going to be adding value every single month. So we were kind of inspired by EOS implementers, and that they finished this day-long intensive meeting, and the rule is, if you're not happy, don't pay for it. Like, literally, don't sign that check. And we were like, wow, that's really putting everything on the line, having some skin in the game. And so we told in our sales pitches, we're like, the reason that we do this is because we want to make sure every single month when you send us that check that you feel like you're getting a great value for that spend. And to our staff, we always, I guess, believed that we were providing a high level of value to the client. So I don't think it changed our culture necessarily, but I could see how that could have a positive impact on it if you spin it the right way, as opposed to saying, guys, don't screw up because everybody could be gone tomorrow, right?
Okay, great. Number 5, intellectual property.
Anybody got a great story on that one? I mean, I can jump in.
Go for it.
Okay. If you, my experience, and I'm not an IP expert by any means, but my experience is if you have, whether it be patents or other IP, you can show actually generate revenue or capture or protect revenue, especially if it's recurring. A huge amount of value in that. I do think there's some confusion out in the marketplace when you see folks who own third-party technology, and they think they're going to benefit from the glow of that just because they've maybe customized it, but they ultimately don't own it. But you can also, even if you don't have strong trademarks or patents that you can show generate revenue, think about your application knowledge. So the way you actually do business and the unique approach that you take is IP, especially if you have a very well-documented process. So if you have a complex sales process or a complex manufacturing process, and you've figured out certain types of manufacturing that others in your industry have not, you may not have a patent on that, but if you have an operations manual, if you have the machinists, if you have the people behind that process, that is IP. And I would highlight the heck out of that when you're selling. We do that with manufacturers all the time if they have that. But they have to document it, right? Either in the operations manual or in the book on the business, and you can definitely get another multiple for that. Now, I will just say for any of you, anybody here on a software company or an e-com company where you're strictly software? Okay. You guys get crazy multiples for your businesses. The more scalable those are, the more subscription-based they are. I mean, those multiples, sometimes it's not even EBITDA or earnings multiples, it's just multiples of revenue. So that's an example of some of the craziness you see of IP driving value.
All right, and then I would add to that, Schwegman Lumberg Woosner's been a sponsor of Club E for a number of years, and not only value on the patents, but more and more so trademark side, and being able to protect what you're doing and the messaging and positioning and so forth from the trademark side. So intellectual property, number 5. Number 6, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but coming back to it, customer concentration.
Yeah, I mean, I've had buyers walk away from opportunities when 25% of the revenue is attributed to 2 clients. I mean, I think that is that's key. If you can try to diversify your revenue before you list your business for sale, it's going to, again, add another multiple. I mean, if you've got anywhere from 10 to 25% wrapped in 2 to 5 clients, you probably want to try to at least at a minimum explain how long they've been clients and maybe they're on a contract, how difficult it may be for them to leave, but can definitely detract from value with high concentrations.
I can speak from the kind of growth strategy perspective on this, and that we've tried to narrow our focus to be within a certain range of size so that we'll avoid those outliers and have 3 unfireable clients. That can create a stressful position. And it's been a challenge to stick to that, because as we're trying to grow and not say no to something that's just like right on the edge, we have done that in the past, and it has been good and bad. And on the good side, it has stretched us a little bit and brought us to a new level. On the bad side, it's created some internal stress along the way and growing pains. But I feel like we've never been in a position where we've had one client that was, 30, 40% of our revenue. And that's absolutely intentional. Maybe not because of this specifically, but just because we narrowed our focus to a level of expertise and built processes around that, and then avoided the shiny objects. EOS really helped us with that early on, teaching us that this needs to be our core focus. Anything else that doesn't fall into this, we have to say no to. So we stopped doing, for example, time and materials work. And something will come along and be a nice $10,000, $15,000 project. We've got the capabilities, we've got the bandwidth. But if we spend 20 hours on that, we might miss out on something that's within our core focus and gets us to that $10 million mark instead of that momentary sort of cash bump.
You can sell a business with a high customer concentration. We sold one with a 95% customer concentration out of our Milwaukee office, 95% with one customer, but our client had to take significant terms. And those terms were to be adjusted if the revenue with that client fell off. You see that with professional service firms a lot, CPA firms. We sell those. It is generally some type of adjustment on the anniversary date, say how many of those tax return clients came back. So you can do it, but you don't want to have to, right, to your point. So if you can diversify, do it. Risk equals a lower price, and customer concentration is risk, right? That's what they're worried about.
Okay, thank you. All right, number 7, I wrote it, the term is industry assessment, but basically you look through your crystal ball, you're looking out 1 to 3 years, you're trying to say, hey, what's going on in the economy, what's going on in my industry, and trying to figure out what your financials are going to look like. How important is that?
I think we should make the banker answer that first since we're talking
Sure.
the economy
Sure.
or industry.
So I have a client right now selling their durable medical equipment business, and they've done a ton of research. So the buyers came to them asking, what about Medicare and Medicaid and all these reimbursements? And so they've spent a lot of time digging into, what the lobbyists are working on, what have the historical reimbursement rates been, what are the future ones looking like, and really understanding their industry so that as these buyers are coming in and asking questions about the outlook for reimbursements, which is where their revenue comes from, that they can be able to answer that and have done their research. So yeah, anything that you can do. I did have another client I was working with on the buy side that they were buying a business and had some regulation within that business, and the buyer asked the questions of regulation coming down the pike and potential contracts being renewed, and the seller's response was, well, you have to be prepared to take some risk. That's probably not a good answer, probably won't get you very far with the buyer. So yeah, obviously the more that you can research with the industry and any adjustments to revenue that will take place, especially if you're highly regulated or reliant on some aspect of the government, the more helpful you'll be. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Number 8, repeatable sales process.
Yeah, I'll be brief on that one. If you don't have a sales funnel or stages that your sales process goes through, you're going to have a hard time explaining to a buyer how the future is going to be bright. Acquirers want to know what your win rate is. They want to know what your future pipeline looks like, because your earnings from the past 3 years, those are yours. They're literally buying the future. So if you can't articulate why that's going to continue and how you're going to continue to win clients, and you don't have a CRM or some sales process that shows how many people are in your funnel, good luck convincing somebody that the future is going to be good. So I think it's critical.
We've been going through an internal process recently, documenting all of our core processes, and it's interesting to actually put pen to paper, because the sales process, we all know the sales process because we do it every day, but when you actually sit down and write it for someone else, as if you're going to be hiring someone or potentially putting the company up for sale, it's interesting the ideas that you come up with along the way too. So we've, just by writing it down between Dan and I, like, oh, you know what, we should really look at a new piece of software to tie these two things together, for example, because that's going to create some great efficiencies as the sales team grows.
Great, thank you. Financials are in order. And that means, to me, it means 2 things. It means, do you have kind of the right systems in place to get you the financials? And then the second thing is, you have your arms around the financials, so you know the metrics that are driving your business, tying it in with the sales process. You can forecast out, where the business is going. But anybody want to chime in on that one?
One of my favorite things of business ownership is there are some great financial perks, things that you can run through the business that the IRS lets you do and that are totally deductible. But when you get to selling your company, if you haven't made your earnings crystal clear, if you're treating your business like a piggy bank, it's the 3 years prior to sale, certainly the 1 year, and I'm sure you have some strong opinions on this, is not the time to be doing that. And just give you a quick example. Let's say you're going to save 40 cents on the dollar I don't know what everybody's tax bracket is, but let's say you're going to save 40 cents for every dollar you're not showing a profit. Well, I heard a multiple earlier of 7 times. So, you know, you save that 40 cents, well, you can probably get $5, $6, $7 for that same money, for that same dollar you're going to show. So if you hide your earnings, you're like hiding the best thing about your business that buyers want is proof that it makes money. So clean up your financials, make it easy for a third party to understand, like you were talking about, like the sales process. That's ultimately what they're going to use to decide what the multiples apply to.
Yeah, so I would say the more ad backs you have, the less valuable your business is going to be, and the harder it is for that buyer to get financing. I mean, we see ad backs all over the place, and are they legit? You know, can you document these ad backs into the business? So just reiterate what Chris is saying, and then I would also say that, you know, the quality of the financial statements is important, but also the person that's doing the financial analysis and the financial statements, the bookkeeping, is it a CPA, are they an audit? I mean, the people that are doing the financial statements are just as important as the quality of the financials. I mean, we've seen financial statements from a CPA and maybe it's a smaller CPA firm or they're not, you know, a legit firm. So I would just say, you know, make sure that you have good people doing your financials. You've got a good, solid bookkeeper. You have a good CPA. When you're positioning your company for sale, the people that are behind the numbers are just as important as the numbers themselves, because there's going to be questions. I mean, there's going to be a lot of different questions that come up with regards to the financials. And then to just be able to explain trends. If there's a certain expense item that's up and down, if obviously revenue's up and down or cost of goods sold is up and down, just be able to really explain, you know, why it went up in this year and then down in the next year. And because buyers are going to look for at least 3 years, sometimes a 5-year trend, and ask a lot of questions about things that have gone up and down. And if you don't have good answers to explain those trends, another detraction from value.
I think I just figured out why it's 3 years, by the way. Because that's typically the lease length on a Maserati, right?
Good one. All right, number 10, the team, which kind of on the surface is an obvious one, but then you say, all right, well, what about the team? I've written down a number of things here, but right people in the right chairs, which is an EOS thing used by Mike at Tech Guru. Board, Alex brought up earlier, fiduciary or advisory board. And then I think probably the tipping point on whether you have a solid team and how sellable your business is. Let's say you want to go up to the lake for the summer and you're out of the office for 3 months. Can the business survive without you? And so talk about a little bit about the team.
Yeah, well, you nailed the big one, owner centricity. If you can't go up to the cabin or you can't be here without your phone blowing up, or you can't go on vacation without being detached from the business, then that's going to hurt your multiple. Again, it doesn't mean it's not sellable. You asked a question about the, you know, a smaller business trying to grow where it's just you, is my understanding, right? That could be sellable, but it's going to be a lot harder, and the multiple is going to be a lot lower. So look for ways to create a business where you can work on it and don't have to be in it all the time. Easier said than done, right? But the other one is, if you're on the buy, let's say you're on the buy side, you're looking to make an acquisition right now. You know, in this economy, you're probably, in many cases, one of your biggest assets you're acquiring is people, talent. So outside of the contracts, like the non-competes, stuff like that, that's like the, you know, that's the protection. But why are those people going to want to stay? You know, that team that executes the sales process, is it because of the awesome culture? If you're on the buy side, is your culture going to ruin that? What's your plan? So I think having, especially on the people side, having an M&A or even small business integrator that helps you ask those questions, because there will be, the humans in the deal are going to cause interesting issues, even if the cultures are close, right? So if you want to retain that team, you better have a plan, because if you're the acquirer, you are scary to them, right? I mean, and I've been there myself. You know, I was with a company that was acquired when I was much younger, and everybody thought they were going to be fired, right? They thought that was going to be the announcement, and they weren't. The buyer wanted to make sure everybody stayed, but they get scared to death that that's going to happen, and resumes start going out, and people are uncertain, and they leave, and then they have a bad experience. So just have a plan to keep that asset so it doesn't walk out the door, whatever side of the deal you're on.
Agree.
Since this is the last one, I guess I'll throw another EOS term and tool. So I got to meet my quota, I guess. We started using a new tool from the EOS toolbox called the 555, which is a employee review that ties in with everything else that EOS is doing with like quarterly goal setting and annual planning and 3-year target and all that stuff. And what's really cool about it is that it also goes into the accountability chart, which is EOS terminology for the org chart. And when you look at that every single quarter, it's a reminder of some of the pain points that you might have related to the team. And when you show, the foundation of this company without the owner or the leadership team there, what falls apart. And so at the stage that we're at right now, at 3 million, we have people wearing multiple hats in almost every single seat. But we can draw a path and line that up with a 3-year picture and say, okay, 3 years from now, here are the seats that we're going to be adding so that we've got really great diversification of the roles within the company and no single points of failure. And the cool thing about the 555 is that during your review with all these employees, you look at the roles that they have and they rate it really simply. Do they get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it? And if they check no on any one of those, it's a little red dot on their review. And then that's a topic of conversation. Then you can say, okay, you really don't like answering the phone. I get it. That's not a fun job for anybody. So good news is you're going to move to this box with your next promotion, and we're going to put the new person there, and so that they can get sick of it over the course of a year, kind of thing. But that gives us, that I think does 2 things for us. It builds a really great structure for the team that allows us to go to the cabin when we want to, gives us more value, but then it also helps a lot with retention, because inevitably somebody in your company right now doesn't like something that they're doing, and if you never talk about it, they probably start shopping for a new job. But if you give them a path, you show them the vision, you share that 3-year picture with them, and you say, look, this is a group effort that we all get to this 3-year point, and when we all get there, you have all green on what you're doing. And every day you come into the office, and you get, and most importantly to them, want and have the capacity to do your job.
Great, thank you. Okay, time for a couple of questions. Yes. The question was methodologies to grow into adjacent markets and how to go about assessing that.
I can only speak to what we do when we talk to a potential buy-side client. We look at how acquisitive they've been in the past. First off, are they really capable of going into those adjacent markets? Have they ever done it before, even organically? But we'll usually start with one of our analysts running the industry reports and measuring those markets first, and then looking at the sales process of other folks that are in that industry and saying, what assets is it going to take to duplicate it? So, I mean, we don't have any magic in it. It's just basically assessing the marketplace if it's an established market. And honestly, if it's a brand new emerging market, we bring in consultants from that industry because we're industry agnostic. We know many industries, so we'll often kind of parachute in an industry expert to help us with that question. It's a great question, but it varies so much by industry.
And just really understanding the business plan around that. I mean, does it make sense? And do they have the capital to be successful? I think trying to grow in that way takes capital. So is the balance sheet prepared to do something like that?
I will add that when we worked with Smead and a few other companies, I just think back to what we did bring in some of their partners to talk about that. So some of their channel partners, we had conversations with their key partners to say what were their thoughts on our approach as they were going into new markets. And those partners did bring a lot to the table, so I think that could help.
Okay, yeah, Alex.
In situations where the owner decides to stay and to grow, with the benefit of hindsight, and they fall short, what typically is overlooked? What didn't they see that caused them to fall short of
So again, for you over there, if you didn't hear it, somebody stays because they're trying to grow it and then they fall short. What might be some of the common reasons that that happens?
No plan. No plan. I mean, they're so busy running their business. And the fact is, they generally will say, well, I'm going to stay and grow it to here, to here, to here. But that takes time and money in almost every case. And they don't hire the people to help them. They don't have a plan. They don't have a board of advisors. They don't have a resource like Club E or whatever it is. Who holds the business owner accountable besides the marketplace, right? If they don't have somebody to kick them in the butt, that's what I see. If there's not a board there, somebody else to push them, then they come back a few years later, maybe the economy softened a little bit, and sometimes the earnings are down, right? Because the market's eating some of their lunch.
Yeah, I think there's all different kinds of reasons in the past that could be attributed to the inability to grow. What I see as a challenge for my clients today that are trying to grow is just labor. I mean, trying to get people. I think 98% of my clients are hiring right now, including Highland Bank. We have 4 openings at the bank. So it is a limiting factor to growth, is just having the people to help you get there, no matter what type of business you're in. Is just, can you find the people? Are you willing to pay them enough, and sort of build in a plan to hire the right kind of people to get you there?
Yeah, I don't know that I've got anything to add.
Okay. Other than the right technology.
Yeah, of
That
course.
was the answer. I was giving you the chance. You got to have the right technology.
Sorry.
Da-da-da. No. All right, last question, a quick one. Yes, over here. Yep. Exactly, and I didn't pay you to do this plug for Club E, but now I want to hit our time, but I want to chime in. In January, we did a panel on women business owners, and we touched on some of those topics, and you can go to clube.com and watch that video. I'm bringing them back for an encore in September, so you're the door opener to the September meeting. That group is coming back, so we'll be talking about some of those topics on the female side of business. And then we covered the gig economy a couple of months ago, and that video is also on the website. So thank you for plugging Club E, even though you didn't know you were. Anyway, thank you for doing that. Okay, so to hit our deadline, 2 things. One, June 7th, the Club E meeting is owner with the most options wins, and that's kind of a bookend to this panel, so that's June 7th. And then 30 seconds each, kind of little pearls of wisdom to share with our audience before we wrap up.
You want me to go first?
Go for it.
Okay. Just get a foundation, take a snapshot right now, whether it's something like get your value builder score or having somebody give you a valuation. Just sit down and do some type of assessment of where you're at right now, using a tool to find out where you're at today, and then document where you want to go, whether that's selling, whether it's growing or going. Find out where you're at today. It's worth it. Even if you never sold, these things are going to help you make your company more enjoyable to own and run, for sure.
Yeah, so I'll just say if you're a buyer, you're looking to buy a business and you need a lender involved or an investor to work in parallel with those folks as you're working on your deal. If you spend all this time on the purchase agreement and some of those terms won't work with the lender, for example, an earnout or an employment contract, to just work in parallel with your lender, and then to find some support, whether that's a CEO roundtable group, a board of advisors, Club E, but just recommend to not go at it alone. There's people out there that want you to be successful, so find them and use them. Thank you.
Speaking to the fellow entrepreneurs in the room that are trying to grow their companies, and just thinking a little bit more about what may have caused them to fall short, and some of the reasons I think that we haven't fallen short to date is because of a high level of accountability between my business partner and I. And complete transparency, that if there's something that's bothering us or that we disagree with, we talk about it right away, and it doesn't get personal. It may get emotional a little bit, but we never leave a fight with something unresolved. And something that I heard very recently that I've been trying to ask myself on a regular basis, and I just did this morning as I was brushing my teeth. The question that I asked myself is, am I the leader that this company deserves? All the people that are expecting us to meet that 3-year goal so that they can meet their personal goals, am I living my life? Am I fulfilling my role in that process so that everyone can be successful as well? And I thought that was, I can't remember where I heard that, but I thought that was a really powerful question to ask yourself as the leader of a company. Am I the leader that this company deserves?
Great, thank you very much. Let's thank our panelists. And again, thank you all for attending, and hope to see you on June 7th. Thank you.